What shapes the way you see the world? See, I believe perspective shapes everything. It affects what we believe in, how we act, and who we become. But perspective isn't what's reality, is it? The same thing can look very different depending on how you choose to view it. You can think of it as a camera. When you shift the angle, the picture changes entirely. Let me tell you something about myself. I was born into two worlds, my father being a Muslim and my mother being a Hindu. Now for some of you guys in the crowd who know the history, you might think, wow, that's a tough mix. Two religions that have been at odds for centuries. But if anything, that's far from the truth. The truth is, my upbringing has been one of the greatest blessings of my life. When I sit down with my family for Eid, I'm shown love, gratitude, and kindness. And when I sit down with my family for Diwali, I'm shown the same love and the same light. From one perspective, there are two conflicting belief systems. But if you look differently, if you look deeper, in my personal belief, there are two paths leading to the same light. Today, I want to share with you a message. I want to invite you to look closer and to look different, to look deeply, and to realize that perspective not only influences who we are, but the lives we lead. See, the way we see things limits us. We put up walls when none are needed, and we focus on conflict rather than connection. Let me give you an example. A metaphor I like to call the room full of doors. Think of it like this. You are standing in a room and there are 10 doors. 9 of them are locked. You might be angry, you might feel frustrated, you might say, why me? Why am I stuck here? We spend so much time focusing on the opportunities closed off to us, we miss the ones right in front of us. When we shift our perspective, what seemed impossible becomes possible. What seemed like a dead end becomes a new path. All you had to do was look differently. Let me give you a real-world example. Thomas Edison. It is said that he failed over 1,000 times before helping to make the light bulb. He didn't see each of those failures as setbacks. He saw them as stepping stones to success. If you asked him what he thought about those, he wouldn't say, I failed. He would say, I found 1,000 ways that won't work. All he had to do was look differently. Now you might be thinking, one of the examples I just gave is a metaphor, and the other one is about a guy who lived over 100 years ago. How does this apply to you guys today? Everybody here is an urban American. We all know daylight savings. We might think of it as an annoyance. 2 times a year, we change our clocks. We may feel groggy in the morning. It's just an annoyance. But that time is crucial for a rural American who might be a farmer on the field making more food for the American society. From one perspective, it's an annoyance, something that bugs us. But if we look differently, we will realize that that is actually crucial time for a farmer. I believe perspective is powerful because it determines how we respond to setbacks. It determines how we respond to challenges. Shifting your giving up your own values or your own truths, it just means being open to understanding others' values and others' truths. I believe this message is more important than ever today. In this world, we are constantly divided, whether it's politics, religion, or other personal beliefs. It's always my truth versus your truth, my right versus your wrong. What if we took a step back? What if we zoomed out our camera angle and looked at the bigger picture? Imagine what our communities, our countries, or even the world would look like today if we did this. Instead of building walls, what if we built bridges? It all starts with perspective. So here's my challenge for you. In the next day or the next week, find one moment to shift your perspective. Whether it's an argument with a friend or family member or someone you just met, ask yourself, what am I not seeing? Take a step back, look at the bigger picture, because I believe when you do this, the world around you begins to change. Let me leave you with this. Life is not about just your own perspective, it's about learning from many. I'm proud to be both Muslim and Hindu. I'm proud to hold both two truths in my heart because it's taught me something valuable. There's always another way to see something. So think of the world as a room full of doors with endless opportunities. When you change your perspective, you change your life. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Our next speaker, Dr. Blaney, is a history teacher. He shares his passion for teaching young minds as they engage with the past, present, and future. Having taught on 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and North America, he brings a global perspective to his classes. Today, as we stand at the brink of a digital revolution, reshaping how we learn, connect, and innovate, Dr. Blaney challenges us to consider how history not only informs the present, but also shapes the future that we create. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Blaney.
Hello, everybody. So it may seem strange at first as to why they invited a history guy to talk about innovating tomorrow, right? And indeed, it is one of my colleagues, let's just call him a jealous physics teacher, loves to say the dad joke to me all the time. Why bother studying history? It has no future in it. It doesn't have the same dad joke chops that I do, right? And indeed, at first glance, it would seem, what relevance does the past have? I mean, we do stand in some pretty unique circumstances that seem to have little parallel in the past. If we take, for example, things like data, in terms of unique data in 2024, they'll have produced at least 10 times the amount of data in that 1 year than all of human civilization from about roughly 8,000 BC to the year 2080. That's a lot, right? And that's something that, again, we aren't quite sure yet how to handle. Or let's take communications. Again, we now live in an era where we can instantly contact anybody in the world. You can go viral from anywhere in the world, right? You don't have to go to London or New York or Tokyo or something to meet people, do business, all like that. It all can be done remotely. What does that mean for human societies? Well, I'm not entirely sure yet because we haven't really experienced it yet, right? Or even taking man and machine, right? We normally think of, again, machines as something separate, and something that assists us, that does tasks for us. But increasingly, the differentiation between human and machine is being blurred, right? We now have robotics with AI intelligence implanted in them to do much more complex and human tasks. And bionic limbs, I mean, I grew up in I was alive in the 1970s where they had the $6 man, the bionic man. That seemed so out there, but it exists now, right? So these are things that, again, we're going to have to grapple with that are quite new, that if we look to the past may seem, I'm not sure where I can look to find those types of answers. But I would say a lot of this comes from perhaps a misperception as to the purpose of history, what history is. Right? I mean, I think there's a common perception that history is details about dead people, right? I know my wife certainly has that. Point of view, what can you say? You marry your opposite. And I think, again, if we think about more history as sort of like, almost like a chat GPT in the sense it's this vast database from which we can ask questions to and get answers for, right? That we can find patterns, while again recognizing sort of nuances and differences from situation to situation, do help us to sort of at least start framing and perhaps prevent repeating old mistakes. So, one thing that historians like to do, to again attempt to sort of analyze that past as opposed to simply memorize it, is to divide it up into periods, or for the Taylor Swift fans out for you, eras. There's no Taylor Swift fans, I can't believe it. So, honoring Taylor Swift, we're going to call this I'm going to call our period the era of innovation. What do I mean by that? It's not simply about inventions. We've had inventions even before there were Homo sapiens. I'm sure you've all heard of Homo habilis, for example. Right? So inventing things isn't anything new. But what is new is the sort of making it a sort of systemic a core element of what our civilization is. What does that mean in real terms? Well, let's say, two of the sort of four great inventions of ancient Chinese history, right? Paper and gunpowder. For all intents and purposes, since their invention up until the present day, their use hasn't changed much. Right? Let's take something a little more modern, born in this era of innovation, flight. So let's think. The Wright brothers, they flew in 1903. They flew for not very long and not very far, just a little over 850 feet. It's 1903. That's not centuries later, but 5 decades later, Soviet Union sends Sputnik into space and orbits the Earth in an hour and a half. Right? That's a 54, I believe, year difference. Not centuries, decades. And after that, by 1969, the US, with the Apollo 11 mission, has sent man to the moon. These are things that would have been, even to the most advanced ancients, unthinkable. These would be like godlike powers. Our sorcerers would produce magic, right? So that sort of difference, that idea of being able to go beyond, right, is sort of more characteristic, that systematic. Indeed, I would even say it's changed the way that we look at our past. Normally, in history books, you would think, well, the kind of things that would have been sort of emphasized would have been rulers, empires, religions, undoubtedly important, right? But nowadays, when I do a thing every year with my students where I ask them to do a top 5 list. Give me the top 5 events and the top 5 people, in your opinion, in world history. And prominent amongst them are inventors, inventions, innovations, things that have produced great change in the modern period. I imagine if we would have asked that question 100 years ago, it wouldn't have been that way. It would have been great men, who would have been rulers or religious leaders or something like this, right? Indeed, now it becomes points of sort of like ethnic or civilizational pride to say that we are the ones who invent things, right? Modern Westerners will say, oh, right, we go back and we tie the important part of our sort of legacy is that of the ancient Greeks who invented so many things. Muslims will point to the Golden Age in terms of the advancements they've made in mathematics and philosophy, so on and so forth. That's become sort of central core to our idea into almost what we look into history to give pride in what we are. And again, that's a significant shift from how earlier generations would have looked at history. So, as well, I would say that what also in terms of this era is different is, again, it's defined by change. I would say it's almost inevitable and irreversible change ever since what we now call the age of European exploration. Since then, there has been virtually revolution after revolution after revolution. Again, if you have the great benefit of taking world history, where not only the age of exploration, but the commercial revolution, the scientific revolution, Atlantic revolutions, industrial revolutions, this is incomparable to other periods in history, right? And it is what defines us, that change. So, what lessons can we take away from understanding that, okay, we live in a somewhat unique period? Well, one, you can't stop that change, right? It has to be embraced. People have tried, right? Powerful ideologies thought that this change was something that could be suppressed or set aside. They were all proven wrong, often to great human misery. And indeed, I would say the difference in that change is, again, if you take someone, let's say, a Roman from the 5th century BC, you take him and you plant him in, let's say, Europe, let's put him in Constantinople in the 15th century. And besides gunpowder and Jesus, he'd recognize what he sees. After that point, more complicated. If we would have taken that, and even if we would have taken the early Renaissance man that he would meet at that time, bring him to 2025, they would not be able to understand what's going on. So, this era of innovation is, one, fundamentally different in terms of, again, the human experience and how we live our lives compared to earlier pasts. but also B, it's rooted deeply, and this is the reason why that change is irrevocable, it's rooted in human nature, not historical circumstances. Rises and falls of empires, or rise and spreads of religion, migrations of people, those are historical circumstances, right? In this case, it's human nature. What do I mean by that? What I mean by the desire, right, for a better life, desire for comfort, the desire for choice, the desire for better health. All these things drive a lot of the change that we have, right? And you can't, well, in essence, change that. You can't tell people, right, that no, stay where you are, right, in a sort of relatively static society where things are largely mapped out for you. Indeed, history has proven to us that people will take great risks. I often say to my students, when we get to the age of exploration, I said, imagine there's this Italian man down at the port, and he wants, he's looking for people to get on the ship, and he's going to sail to Asia. How long is that going to take? I don't know. Will we get there? I hope so. Will we get back? God willing. Right? But people got on that boat. We live in Virginia, Jamestown. Think of the attrition rate. People knew it. They got on boat after boat to get here, as they still do today. So these are things, again, that are motivating and pushing that change. Because, quite frankly, the old status quo wasn't working for the vast majority of the human population. So, now again, you could even be a great power. You could be a China, right? That has very sophisticated, relatively advanced agricultural societies, and again, considerable power and influence for almost all of known history. Then all of a sudden we come to the Industrial Revolution, come to the 19th century, and a relatively small island on the other side of the world does pretty much what it wants with China. A couple of decades later, a small little island on the other side of the East China Sea can do the same. Power can't stop change. Change comes. China, unfortunately, has learned the difficult way that to be the case. So where do we then go from here? Again, I think I'll use one of those, cliches I'm sure everyone's heard, this case from George Santayana, talking about if one who doesn't learn history, learn the past, makes mistakes, same mistakes. Right? I think in this case, there's lots of things that we can think of that are quite predictable in terms of the challenges that, again, while the technology is different, would be the same. Things like displacement, technological unemployment, that is, new technology comes, lots of people lose their jobs, senses of alienation as one's sort of cultures and identity become undermined by, again, a culture that seems to be in constant flux, or as we move around the globe and lose connection with our ancestral roots. Right? These things need not be sort of ignored or swept aside any more than sort of environmental degradation or inequality. Those are all things we can predict that will happen. Right? There is nothing new in that. We can look to the past and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, and adjust it for current circumstances. I would also say, part of this, education is key to that. Since the 19th century and the onset of the Industrial Revolution, it became very aware to lawmakers that the best way to grow the economy and to meet the challenges of the Industrial Revolution is to have a relatively well-educated population that could, again, can do a variety of different types of jobs, right? Not just peasants who know how to farm, not just assembly line workers who know how to do one simple job, but again, can move where the economy needs them. And I think in this education, ironically from us being here at the school, is a large part of that answer, right? We need to be constantly thinking about the type of education we give in terms of setting the right skills and what is the most sort of relevant knowledge for them to succeed moving forward. Thank you.
Dr. Blaney, I must say, in hearing about the accelerating rate of change Just saying, there's an opportunity, maybe history and physics, but think about it. Think about it, okay? All right, our next speaker, Cyrus, is also a freshman here at Basis. He's experienced education in many forms, from public to private. Having been exposed to both the challenges and opportunities within the U.S. educational system, he's become interested in education reform. In his TEDx talk, he will use his insights to explore ways to improve educational outcomes for all students. Please join me in welcoming Cyrus.
Hi guys. Okay. Imagine a country that's the forefront of innovation in academia, but its educational system seems to fail over 1 million of its students. In reality, 64% of Americans are dissatisfied with the quality of their education. Being a student myself, I can somewhat agree with the sentiment. I've attended both private and public schools. In public schools, I accepted for what the system was. I did the assignments, took the exams, didn't get much in trouble. But when I switched schools to a school that prioritized creativity, innovation, and passion, I was amazed at how outdated and old our traditional public school system really is. It wasn't molding their students to become innovators, critical thinkers, and find passion in their works. Instead, it was neglecting the true essence of what educational institutions are about. And that's the problem. The system is not designed to help us think, to innovate, or to grow ourselves. Instead, it's designing good workers. Today, I'd like to talk about why we need educational reform in our traditional school systems and change our perspective on different ways to learn. My first point is that the educational institutions killed creativity and innovation. Rather than supporting innovative ideas, schools promote conformity. And as a result, students are afraid to take risks and try new ideas. Research brings to show that when children progress through their educational careers, they lose their creativity, ability, and innovative skills. A fine example of this is Thomas Edison, a famous inventor. In school, at the age of 12, he was kicked out of school because he was failing his subjects, especially math, and wasn't able to focus during school. Even his teacher said he's too stupid to learn anything. But then on, he became one of the most famous innovators. He went on to build the phonograph, motion picture cameras, and electric light bulb. If that kind of system failed Edison and is continued to be used, imagine how many other creative thinkers are being suppressed. Schools must be building creativity, not suppressing it. If we are to have future innovators, thinkers, and leaders, we will need an educational system that is more focused on original thinking than copying others. My second point is that school systems don't prepare students for the workforce. Education should equip students with the capacity to lead successful lives. But 40% of employees believe schools are not preparing students enough, and 7% believe new graduate students from universities are not prepared for the adulthood. This gap between industry leads to students being deprived of modern problem-solving skills, critical thinking, and flexibility, which are essential in any profession. Schools focus so much on book smarts that they fail to impart practical applicational knowledge. Students are taught how to pass exams, but not how to finance, communicate, and think on their own. Not only does this fail to prepare students for the workplace, it also kills passion and curiosity. If students do not see their education as useful and related to the world, they become bored. Why work at something that seems to have absolutely no use in the real world? If schools include teaching practical skills alongside with academics, students will not only feel better being equipped for life, but also more interested in the way they're learning. My third point is that schools reward memorization, not critical thinking. The biggest shortcoming of our school system is that it rewards kids for memorizing things rather than learning them. It's shown that through rote memorization, It serves to recall short-term memory, but not long-term. As a student myself, I can personally relate. I spent hours studying for exam, memorizing information that I would forget in a matter of weeks. I remember a few times when I just studied to pass the exam, but later on, I could not bring that up in my memory or remember, which mattered most. And I came to a question, was I just studying for the sake of studying, not to actually help me move forward through my academic career? True learning is accomplished when students work with content, analyze, and implement it in real life. Instead of having students merely repeat something, schools need to encourage conversation, projects, and problem solving with real-world content. Unless we leave behind passive memorization and develop active learning skills, we'll never be able to get our schools to reach information and develop valuable skills. In conclusion, our educational system is outdated, and in some significant ways, it's failing us and its students. It suppresses creativity, fails to prepare students for a real-world workforce, and rewards memorization over learning and applicable knowledge. If we're generally going to have a future with innovators, problem solvers, and critical thinkers, we need to renovate education to include creativity, real-world relevance, and good learning. Because ultimately, education shouldn't be about instructing us on what to think, but it should be demonstrating us how to think. And that's it. Thank you.
Sarah Seager's a lot to think about regarding education today, but also education in the future. So we thank you for that. Our next speaker, Dr. Isquith, was born in Columbia, where she pursued her education and graduated as a doctor in dental sciences. With a strong foundation in the medical field, Dr. Isquith's career path took a transformative turn when she discovered her passion for education. For over 23 years, she has dedicated herself to teaching with a particular focus on biology. With a commitment to public health and the environment, Dr. Isquith tirelessly advocates for awareness around microplastics, making it her mission to educate the community on its detrimental effects. This very topic, microplastics, is what Dr. Isquith will talk more about today. And as she phrases it, this is a currently invisible threat to our planet. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Isquith.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to start this conversation with a question. Do you know what the plastic bottle did when it crossed the ocean? It caused chaos. Okay, and did you know it's not fun? Yeah, it wasn't a funny joke. It's like, what? Yes, it didn't cross the ocean. It went and joined the other 3 trillion pieces of plastic that are in the ocean. So it's not a joke. We're living on a planet that the plastic is covering, the plastics are everywhere. And now we don't talk anymore about the plastic bag or the plastic bottle or the toothbrush that ended up in the ocean. We're talking about microplastics. And for that, I have a question for you. Do you see this from there? Do you see this from there? Can you see it? No? But this is a microplastic. Microplastics are only 5 millimeters in size. So you cannot see it, but they are everywhere. They are in our clothes when you use synthetic fabric, when you put those clothes in the washer and they don't get filtered, and they end up in our rivers and in our oceans. That's why I call it the invisible threat, because we don't see it, but it's there. We can see something big, but when you don't see something that is a threat, It's our responsibility to protect the planet. This is causing tons of problems, these little tiny microplastics. There is a patient that went to the doctor because he had really bad stomach pain. And it's like, I feel like something is in my gut. I feel like something is not working properly. They did tons and tons of tests. By the end, they discovered under the cell that there was this material that they couldn't identify. It was something as simple as a little piece of plastics. Recently, we have more and more problems with the microplastics. There was an article that shows that microplastics are ending up in the soil. So lately, our food is low in nutrients. Our food is smaller if it's not genetically modified. Why? Because the soil contains microplastics. It's interesting because for years we're talking about this logo that says reduce, reuse, yes, but we're becoming numb to it. We're becoming numb to it because we hear it so much. But now it's worse, because before we used to take care of big things, but now we are not seeing these microplastics. Lately, our food is smaller in nutrients because the soil is full of microplastics. The soil, when it rains, goes into the sewers. And again, these little microplastics ended up in the river and in our water. There are so many ways that the microplastics can get there. One of the United States is the third country in producing and using plastics. It's the third one. Well, we have a country like Sweden that decided to eliminate the plastics everywhere. No plastic bags. There are regulations for the plastic that you use. Where they go and fill out the shampoo, you bring your container, yes, and you fill out the shampoo instead of just tossing one plastic bottle and, another one. We need to be conscientious of it. That's why I brought this topic today. One of the things that I love at our school is that all the students have refillable bottles, and that makes me super happy every time. Now I want to talk about how we are eating with microplastics. Microplastics in the ocean, since they are super tiny, what happens is the phytoplankton start consuming the microplastic, and the magnification start happening. The phytoplankton comes the little fish, a bigger fish, and a bigger one. And that ends up on your table, and you are consuming these microplastics. There in the Gulf of Mexico, they did this, they took samples of 3 different kinds of fish, and all 3 have microplastics in it. How this is going to shape the future of those organisms in the ocean? Some people think, oh, there are other organisms in the ocean, we shouldn't care about it. But those ended up it's our food, yes? So we need to take care of that. We need to start stopping the consume of plastics. So the 3 types of fish contain microplastic. Now they're changing the taste of the fish. When affect the taste of the fish, it's going to affect the economy of the people that is fishing it, because they cannot sell that fish. And lucky for them, if you didn't feel that taste, what is going to happen? You're going to eat it. And little by little, it's going to cause a change in our body. Lately, came in the news that the tea bags now contain microplastics. Why? So microplastics are getting everywhere, and it's a big threat, and we need to be careful with this. From 1 to 3, which one do you think that is the plastic that is used the most? I'm gonna give you 3: bags, bottles, and plastic bottles. Sorry, plastic bottles, and the other one is plastic. Oh, I remember. Plastic in makeup. These little tiny beads that they use for makeup. Which one do you think is the first one that goes into the ocean? Raise your hand if you think are the plastic bags. Raise your hand if you think are the plastic bottles. Okay? Do you think are the little tiny beads for makeup? Okay? Well, are the plastic bags. Plastic bags are the majority that we find in the ocean. And that makes me super sad. You know why? Because it's so simple that each one of us take a bag that you can reuse. Yes? It's a simple solution. Some people is like, why are you gonna do it? Yes? I mean, it's one simple plastic bag. But we have trillions of them in the ocean they're gonna become microplastics because deterioration, because the waves, because they move from one side to another, that will become microplastics. So something as simple, one simple change that we can do in our lives, that is to use, a reusable bag. Something to think about it. Some people prefer to ignore it, but by ignoring it is that we're getting where we are right now. So something that you can think about it, go home. Students, the ones that are here, join campaigns. Yes? Fight this, educate. Education is what is gonna make us understand that this can happen and how prevent it. The problem with us, humans, is that we are reactive and not proactive. Yes? We are reactive. Now what we can do to track those microplastics, what we can do, oh yes, we can create this. We can create a net. We can collect it. Why in the first place we don't solve it? It's something that your young minds, students, your young minds need to start thinking about this, how we can prevent this. We have some really nice companies around the world. We have some in my country where they use the plastics, they compress it and become frame glasses. We have one in Mexico where they take all the plastics that they collect in the ocean and they make desks for students. So yes, we're innovating. In my country, we have some companies that are creating bags that you can use one, twice, without starch, and then you can plant it, and they are biodegradable. So you, your minds, please, this is the moment that we need. This is the moment and the opportunity to put our bright minds to prevent more microplastics to go in our food, in our environment. So I want to bring this, put it on the first page, because we have talked so much about, recycling, reducing, reusing, that we have forgotten. So with this in your minds, think about it. This is not to scare you. This is for us to react as something that is killing us without we noticing it. So I hope that your bright minds, think about what I say today and make a difference. Thank you.
I think it's important for us to remember, again, that this is one of the TEDx youth events. And so, we're very fortunate to have young people in the audience, and as Dr. I is mentioning, it really is kind of a call to action, right? If we are identifying problems, well, what are we going to do about it, right? How are we going to take action and implement future innovative solutions? So thank you for that, Dr. Our final speaker, Shayan, is a junior. He jokingly shares that he has been exposed to the tendency of his friends, family, and peers to, overcomplicate everything. He adds that he is no exception to overcomplication. In his speech this evening, he plans to use his vast knowledge of overcomplication to demonstrate an important lesson in his speech, what weighs more. Please welcome me and join. Please join me in welcoming Shayan.
Thor Heyerdahl once said, "Progress is a man's ability to complicate simplicity." So now I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and we will see how far we can overcomplicate. What weighs more, A tennis ball, a soccer ball, a basketball, or the sun? Well, the obvious answer would be the sun, but why is that? Can you weigh such an object? I mean, it's quite easy to weigh a soccer or tennis ball. However, these weights are determined by the amount of attraction force the Earth has on these objects, a so-called mg factor. The sun is in space, so it has a different mg. We need a good standard of comparison, so let's go up into space and measure these things. Put a basketball on the scale and, oh, you get 0. Well, why is that? Remember, there is no gravity in space, so therefore mg is 0. Okay, let's just do it on Earth then. Put a basketball on the scale, it works. Tennis ball on the scale, it works. Bring the sun down here and we all get completely evaporated. Wonderful. This is not a very easy question to answer. These concepts of weight and heaviness are very fickle terms, after all. Depending on where you measure them, you can get a different result. Going back to that mg factor, if you measure it in space, if you measure it on Earth, if you measure it on the moon, you'll get completely different results. Therefore, you need a true measurement of what mass or weight actually is. And I just said it, this is called mass. In order to properly investigate mass, we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. What is mass? How can we derive it? And why should we care? All right, let's start with that first question. What is mass? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster, mass is the property of a body that is a measure of its inertia, a measure of how much material is in the object, and the property of a body that allows it to have a weight in a gravitational field. Now, I just sounded really confident in saying that, but really what I was thinking was, what? I mean, for one of the most fundamental concepts that the universe has to offer, we came up with the most convoluted definition possible. But maybe it'll make it easier on ourselves if we can separate it off into its 3 parts. First, what is mass? Mass is a measure of inertia. Second is mass is a measure of how much material is in the object. And third, mass is the property that gives the body weight in a gravitational field. To start off, inertia is the measure of resistance to motion. So, throwing a tennis ball is easier than throwing a basketball, and throwing a basketball is easier than throwing the sun. Who knew? Who knew? But anyway, you can see from this that the higher you have in mass, the more resistance to motion you'll have. However, there's still a problem with this. Think that you are throwing a basketball on Earth versus throwing one on the moon. The one on the moon is going to be much easier to throw, will it not? Well, inertia is still dependent on gravity. This is a problem, so maybe the second part of our definition will help us remedy that. And the second part of the definition says mass is a measure of how much material is in an object. So yes, you are throwing a basketball on the moon versus on Earth, but these basketballs have the same amount of mass in each of them. And that is the important part. This second part of the definition is much more resistant to gravity. And this might help us to understand the third part of the definition. This part of the definition states that mass is the property of a body that gives it weight in a gravitational field. Now it's going to be really hard to demonstrate this using basketballs, so maybe we can measure it with something else. What about the sun? Well, the sun, in reality, people don't measure the mass of celestial objects using scales. In the case of our sun, they measure it using the orbit of the Earth, which revolves around it. The sun is so big and has so much stuff compacted inside of it that it can make the Earth literally move in an orbit around it. This property is called Newton's law of universal gravitation, and it refers to how any 2 objects of a non-zero mass have a constant attraction force to each other. Just as the sun attracts the Earth attracts me, and I attract the Earth just a little bit, and the K-dramas attract my mother. Well, anyway, from this we can say that anything with mass has tiny attraction forces to everything around it. And in summary, for our entire definition, anything with mass contains substance, is resistant to motion, and exerts these tiny gravitational forces on each other. This is pretty solid, huh? Using Newton's law of universal gravitation, scientists have found the mass of the sun to be 1.9891 times 10 to the mean, pretty easy speech, huh? See you later. I'm out of here. Yeah. Just kidding. Well, how it actually goes is I just said something very interesting, right? Kilogram. Not 1.9891 times 10 to the 30th kilograms. I may have conceptually defined mass, but that's completely useless if you can't have a practical application. So what is a kilogram? 1,000 grams. That has the same amount of impact as if I said I was born at a very young age. So maybe we need to dive deeper into this. And this brings us to the second major question. How can we derive mass using its units? Well, a kilogram is 1,000 grams, but to define a gram, we need to define a meter. And in 1791, around the same time as the beginning of the Haitian Revolution, the French National Assembly defined a meter to be 1/10,000,000th of the distance between the North Pole and the equator, considering that that distance traveled along a perfect circle and was measured along the meridian through Paris. In 1889, they put up a standard meter bar displaying how much this actually was, and in 1960, they completely did away with all of that and said that a meter was a specific wavelength of a specific emission line of krypton 86. So, here's a question. Why? Yeah, that's so stupid. I mean, one of the most fundamental concepts of the universe measured it by a specific wavelength of a specific emission line of a specific isotope of krypton. Well, in 1983, they agreed with that notion that it was stupid and changed it again to the distance light travels in 1/300,000,000th of a second. And this is really, really nice because it relates directly to the speed of light itself, the fastest speed in the universe, which is 300 million meters per second. Well, going back to our conversation about mass, in 1795, the same French National Assembly as before defined 1 gram to be the equivalent of the mass of 1 cubic centimeter, which is what we just talked about that, of water at 4 degrees Celsius. And this is important for 2 things. It's the fundamental basis of our entire density system, because the definition of a gram is 1 centimeter cubed of water, and the density of water is 1 gram per centimeter cubed. While also it's important because it relates back to a fundamental molecule of life, water molecules. We can use a simple conversion to think that 1 gram of water can have 3.3 times 10 to the 22nd water molecules. So, is that it? I mean, we physically defined mass using its units, and we conceptually defined mass using the laws of the universe. So why does it feel like something's missing? Well, it's time that we ask ourselves a third and final question. Why do we care? Why does this matter? And there it is, isn't it? Matter. Everyone learns in school that matter is something that takes up space, and in order to take up space, you must have a certain tangible characteristic. Now, I want you to all think for a few seconds, what could that be? Okay, count to 5, that's probably enough time, right? Well, the answer is mass. The answer was in front of us the entire time, huh? The entire concept of my speech is about mass. Well, mass is something that helps you take up space. In order to have matter, you must have mass, and mass is a condition of matter. Anything that takes up space must have this matter, which means it must have mass. And if you think about it like that, where mass is the prerequisite to our own existence, it is so remarkably simple. Everybody knows it from the time they're born because it's an instinctual definition. When an infant grasps its mother, when a teenager holds onto their phone, when a blinded veteran grips a rail, each and every single one of them know that something is there. Something with substance, something with matter, something with mass. Yet, whenever they went to school, they were taught the long and convoluted definition of mass. You see, when talking about mass, it is easiest to see how commonly humans overcomplicate things. I mean, I just spent almost 10 minutes talking about what mass is. We went over the Merriam-Webster, Newton's law of universal gravitation, We even went over history dating back to over 200 years in order to scrape the tip of an iceberg of how for over 200 years, humanity has been trying to define something they already knew since they were primates. It is human nature to overcomplicate things. An example is our judicial system with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of laws talking about everything it could possibly talk about. Many of these laws are definitions, extremely complicated definitions of something extremely simple. There have been entire court cases on what legally constitutes as a chicken. Google Friglement Importing Company versus B&S International Sales Corporation for more information. However, through all of these laws, there are still countless loopholes which greedy politicians and corrupt officials take every single day. Even for our most overcomplicated systems, there still exist oversights. However, humanity's ability to overcomplicate everything is not all bad. For example, again, 500 years ago, we were trading bread for firewood, and now we have partial differential equations longer than my wingspan, which denote similar transactions with USD instead of bread and the NASDAQ instead of firewood. In a matter of minutes, we can trade something from the other side of the world, just like that. And as you can see, humanity has overcomplicated things to the point of creating the internet and air conditioning, but also to the point of creating climate change and nuclear bombs. To me, this dichotomy encapsulates the weight of being a human quite well. However, the only thing that matters, that has ever mattered, and that will ever matter, is if we can use our power to overcomplicate things to solve important problems and to make equally as powerful solutions. So when somebody asks you what weighs more, a tennis ball, a basketball, a soccer ball, or the sun, don't overthink it, because the answer is the sun.
Well, Shayan, I think I would say mission accomplished and overcomplicated. I would also say, very much appreciate in that overcomplication, bringing clarity to the complex. So thank you for that. Look all, here at Basics Independent McLean, we talk about student leadership. And I think it's very important for all of you to know that tonight, I just kind of showed up. Which means that our students did a whole lot of background work by way of getting the licensing for this event, by way of doing the promotion for this event, by way of getting our speakers prepped and ready for this event, by way of getting this microphone ready for this event. So how about a round of applause again for our committee? Thank you all so much. This event also would not be possible were it not for our 5 speakers here who, again, get us to ponder, to think further about, again, today, where we are today, but also with regard to innovation for tomorrow. So thank you again to our speakers. Thank you so much. And with that all, we wish you a lovely evening.